Hey, good morning. Chicago police tell us a Maywood woman is now facing charges of murder and vehicular hijacking after she allegedly hit and killed an Uber Eats driver near Loretto Hospital. Police tell us this woman here, 33-year-old Montoya Perry, was arrested after 10 hours after she stole an Uber Eats driver's car and hit him before taking off. That Uber Eats driver was Daniel Figueroa, a 28-year-old man from Downers Grove. He was found unresponsive just after 2 a.m. on Monday near Flournoy Street in the South Austin neighborhood. He was taken to Mount Sinai Hospital where he was pronounced dead. This morning, a GoFundMe page for Daniel is up and running. It was started by his girlfriend, Sandra. You can see her in this picture, and she has received over $6,000 in donations so far out of her goal of $11,000. She says in part, on February 23rd, 2026, my life changed forever when I lost my significant other, Daniel. He was the main provider for our home and the person I shared my life with. His passing has left not only an emotional void, but also a sudden financial burden that I never expected to face. She adds, every day brings new challenges as I try to find a way forward for myself and our child. The weight of these responsibilities is overwhelming, and I am doing my best to stay strong for our family. Sandra says those donations will go toward funeral and memorial costs, as well as monthly living expenses and outstanding bills. Meanwhile, Perry is scheduled to appear in court today for her first court appearance here at Layton Criminal Courthouse this morning.
Most people were asleep. Daniel was working. 2 a.m, West Side, Chicago, delivering food to hospital workers who could not leave their shift. He was not bothering anybody. He was just doing his job, and somebody took his life for it. Daniel Figueroa was 28 years old. He was from Downers Grove, Illinois, a suburb outside the city, the kind of place where people work hard and keep their heads down. He had a girlfriend, Sandra. He had a child, and by every account, this man carried his family on his back. Sandra would later describe him as the main provider for their home and the person she shared her life with. So when the bills came, when the family needed something, Daniel handled it. That is just who he was. Now, nobody signs up for Uber Eats because things are going perfectly. You drive those late-night shifts because you are making it work. You are filling in the gaps. You are doing what you have to do. And on the night of the February 23rd, 2026, Daniel was doing exactly that. He was out there at 2 a.m, not because he wanted to be, but because that is what a provider does. He had a delivery to make near Loretto Hospital on Chicago's west side. Hospital workers on a night shift waiting on their food. Daniel was almost there. He never made it inside. Let me tell you something. The corner of Flournoy and Central in the South Austin neighborhood. That is where this story turns. Daniel had pulled up in his car, delivery in hand, just steps away from that hospital entrance. And that is when Montoya Perry showed up. Perry was 33 years old, from Maywood. Now, the details of exactly how the encounter started are still unfolding, but what investigators say happened next is not complicated. Perry robbed him. She took his car, and as she drove away in his vehicle, she hit him with it. She ran over the man whose car she had just stolen and kept going. Girl, make it make sense. Daniel was found unresponsive right there near Flournoy Street, on the ground, in the cold, in the middle of the night. Neighbors in the area say he had been trying to deliver food to the very hospital workers just yards away from where he fell. He was that close. He was right there. Emergency services responded and rushed him to Mount Sinai Hospital, but the injuries were too severe. Daniel Figueroa was pronounced dead that same morning. He was 28 years old. He had a child at home, and he had gone to work that night so his family would be okay. The woman left behind. When Sandra found out, her world came apart. She later wrote about it publicly, and her words are not easy to read. She said, "On February 23rd, 2026, my life changed forever when I lost my significant other, Daniel. He was the main provider for our home and the person I shared my life with. His passing has left not only an emotional void, but also a sudden financial burden that I never expected to face. She went on. Every day brings new challenges as they try to find a way forward. For myself and our child, the weight of these responsibilities is overwhelming, and I am doing my best to stay strong for our family. Let that sit for a second. This woman woke up one morning, and the person who helped keep her world together was gone. Not sick, not in an accident. Gone because somebody decided to rob an Uber Eats driver at 2 a.m. and then ran him over when they left. And now Sandra is sitting there trying to figure out how to cover funeral costs, monthly bills, and raise a child. Alone. She set up a GoFundMe. She asked for $11,000. The community showed up. Over $6,000 came in almost immediately. Strangers, pouring in what they could, because sometimes people see a story and they just know, this one is not right. Period. While Sandra was sitting at home trying to process the worst news of her life, Chicago police were already moving. Homicide detectives caught the case, and they got to work fast. The scene near Flournoy and Central was not hard to read. A man was down. His car was gone, and somebody had driven off in it. Now here is the thing about 2 a.m. on the west side of Chicago. It is not exactly a quiet hour. There are people out. There are cameras. There are neighbors who hear things, see things, and know things. Investigators started pulling the threads together, and those threads led them in one direction, toward Montoya Perry. Police were able to identify her as a suspect within hours of the incident. Not days. Hours. Which tells you the evidence was not hiding. It was right there. Whatever she left behind at that scene, and whatever the cameras and witnesses in that area captured. It was enough for detectives to put a name and a face to what happened to Daniel before the sun even came up properly that morning. Moving on, because here is where it gets interesting. Perry did not stay in the city. After leaving Daniel's body near that hospital, she drove his car out to Maywood, the same suburb she was from. Now, whether she thought she had gotten away with it, or whether she was just trying to put distance between herself and what she had done, we do not know. But Maywood is not that far, and Chicago police are not known for letting cases like this go cold while the trail is still warm. About 10 hours after Daniel was found unresponsive on that street, officers located Montoya Perry in Maywood and took her into custody. 10 hours. That is how long it took. She had barely had time to figure out her next move before it was already over for her. Anyways, let us talk about what she was actually doing out there that night, because that part matters too. The area around Loretto Hospital on the west side, that is not unfamiliar territory for late-night activity. Daniel had pulled up to make a delivery. He was steps away from the hospital entrance, doing his job, minding his business. And according to what neighbors and investigators pieced together, Perry approached him, robbed him, and took his car. She did not just steal the vehicle and leave him standing there. She hit him with it on her way out. She ran over the man she had just robbed and kept driving. Oh, so now you are leaving a man on the ground in the street at 2 a.m. after taking everything he had on him. Like, what exactly was the plan here? There is no version of this story where that reads as an accident. You do not accidentally run over the person you just robbed. You do not accidentally drive off in a dead man's car and end up in the next suburb over. Every single step of what happened that night was a choice, and Daniel paid for every one of those choices with his life. The detectives who worked this case moved with urgency because they understood something that sometimes gets lost in the noise of a big city. This was not a nameless statistic. This was a father. This was a provider. This was somebody's person. And the way they closed in on Perry within the same day tells you they treated it exactly like that. When Perry was arrested in Maywood that Monday afternoon, Chicago police wasted no time laying out exactly what she was being charged with. 1 count of felony murder, 1 count of vehicular hijacking. Felony murder means that even if the argument is ever made that running Daniel over was not the original intention, it does not matter. When someone dies as a direct result of a felony you are committing, you own that death, legally and morally. Perry had allegedly committed a robbery and a carjacking, and Daniel Figueroa died because of it. That is the charge. That is the weight she is now carrying. Vehicular hijacking is exactly what it sounds like. She took his car by force. That alone is a serious felony in Illinois. But paired with a murder charge, we are talking about a case that could put her away for the rest of her life. She was brought to the Layton Criminal Courthouse for her first court appearance, and while the legal process was just beginning, the streets already had their verdict. So what? She thought there would be no consequences. She thought she could rob a man, run him over, drive off in his car, and that would just be the end of it? Let me tell you something. The city of Chicago was watching this one closely, because Daniel was not just a name in a headline. He was a real person. He had a family waiting for him to come home, and he never did. The community response said everything. Within hours of Sandra's GoFundMe going live, donations started flooding in. Strangers who had never met Daniel, who had never met Sandra, who had never even heard of Downers Grove, they showed up. Because people understand that a good man doing the right thing should not end up dead on a street in the middle of the night with his car gone and his family left to figure out how to survive without him. But hey, that is exactly what happened. And now Montoya Perry was sitting in custody, facing charges that carry the kind of sentences you do not come back from easily. The legal process would take time. It always does. But the facts of the case were not complicated. A man went to work. He was robbed. He was killed with his own car. And the woman police say did it was in custody before the day was out.
In some developing news now, a woman is charged in that deadly carjacking of an Uber Eats driver on the west side.
Police say she robbed the man and then ran him over with his own car.
Darius Johnson joining us live now from the Layton Criminal Courthouse with what we're learning about this. Darius, good morning.
Hey there, ladies. Good Wednesday morning to the both of you. Overnight, Chicago police are announcing the arrest of a 33-year-old woman who they say is now charged with murder and vehicular hijacking and the death of 28-year-old Daniel Figueroa. Take a look. Chicago police say Montoya Perry was arrested Monday afternoon in Maywood, about 10 hours after this deadly incident. Investigators say the 28-year-old Daniel Figueroa was working as an Uber Eats driver when he was carjacked around 2 a.m. Monday morning on Flournoy and Central. Neighbors say Figueroa was trying to deliver food to hospital workers when he was killed just steps away from Loretto Hospital. Police say Perry hit and killed Figueroa as she left in his vehicle. Area 4 homicide detectives identified her as a suspect and took her into custody hours after that incident. She is now charged with 1 count of felony murder and 1 count of vehicular hijacking. Back out here live this morning, Perry will now face a judge here at the Layton Criminal Courthouse in her first court appearance, which is expected to take place later on this afternoon. For now, we're live at 26 in California this morning. I'm Darius Johnson.
Montoya Perry walked into the Layton Criminal Courthouse for her first appearance, and the courtroom was just the beginning of what is going to be a very long road for her. The charges on the table, felony murder and vehicular hijacking, are not the kind you negotiate your way out of with a good story. The state of Illinois does not look kindly on cases where a man ends up dead in the street, and the person responsible drove off in his car. The prosecution's case, even at this early stage, was not hard to follow. Daniel Figueroa was working. He was robbed. He was struck and killed by his own vehicle. Perry was identified, located, and arrested within 10 hours. The evidence moved fast because the facts were not buried. They were right on the surface. Period. Court does not need to be complicated when the story tells itself. There will be more hearings. There will be motions and dates and continuances the way the legal system always moves. But what will not change is what happened on that street. What will not change is that Daniel is gone. What will not change is that a 33-year-old woman from Maywood made a series of decisions in the early hours of that Monday morning that ended one man's life and destroyed an entire family's sense of safety and stability. The courtroom will do what it does, and we will be watching. Here is what stays with you after a story like this. Daniel. Figueroa was not a celebrity. He was not in the news before this. He was just a 28-year-old man from Downers Grove trying to provide for his family. He drove for Uber Eats because that is what people do when they love someone enough to sacrifice their sleep, their comfort, and their safety to make sure the bills are covered. He was out there at 2 a.m. because that is what a provider looks like in real life. Not glamorous, not celebrated, just consistent. And he was killed for his car. Let me tell you something. There are thousands of people just like Daniel out on these streets every single night, driving for Uber, DoorDash, Instacart, whatever it takes, delivering food to nurses and security guards and janitors who are also just trying to get through their shifts. These are people doing quiet, thankless work in the dark hours when the rest of the world is asleep. And they are out there largely alone, with little protection, and no guarantee that the next delivery will not be their last. That is the part of this story that should make all of us uncomfortable. Sandra is at home right now raising their child without Daniel. She is waking up every morning to a house that feels different because the person who held it together is no longer there. She is doing her best to stay strong, her words, not mine, while carrying a grief and a financial burden that she never saw coming and never asked for. And their child is growing up with a hole where a father used to be. Not because of illness, not because of time, because of a robbery that never should have happened. Girl, that child did not deserve that. Sandra did not deserve that. Daniel did not deserve that. The community showed up in the way communities do when a story cuts deep enough. Over $6,000 raised almost immediately for a family that most donors had never met. Because sometimes you do not need to know someone personally to know that what happened to them was wrong. Sometimes the facts alone are enough to move people. But donations, as meaningful as they are, do not fill the space that Daniel left. They help Sandra keep the lights on. They help cover the funeral. They help with the bills he used to handle. But they do not replace him at the dinner table. They do not replace his voice in that house. They do not replace the version of the future that Sandra and their child had been building with him. That future is gone now. And a 33-year-old woman sitting in a jail cell is the reason why. Moving on. Because that is what Sandra has to do. That is what their child has to do. That is what every person who loved Daniel has to do, even when it feels impossible. You keep going because stopping is not an option when there is a child watching you figure out how to survive. Daniel Figueroa worked through the night so his family would be okay in the morning. That is who he was. And nobody who hears this story should ever forget it.